And hello out there, and welcome to this week's Blade Family Reunion. It's Saturday morning, November 21st of 2020. Still dealing with the pandemic, but looks like we've got some light at the end of the tunnel finally. And speaking of lights, I'm going to talk to a bright light at the East Bakersfield High School Blade family. This week we've got Mrs. Noelle Combs. She'll be joining me on the phone here in just a moment. Noelle does a lot of amazing things you're going to hear about at our school and has an amazing story to tell about her path back to East Bakersfield High School. If you are a graduate of East Bakersfield High School in that 1992 to 94 time frame, hearing from Noelle is going to bring back a lot of memories for you, so I hope you enjoy. Morning, November 21st, and I've got an amazing Blade family member on the phone with me. Good morning, Mrs. Combs. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. So, Noelle Combs is our department chair in the social studies department, and we're going to take a few minutes just to figure out how Noelle and her family are doing, what she's been up to since high school. So, I know you had a lot of friends and were in the band, so you knew a lot of people. So, hopefully some of them will tune in to hear what you've been up to. So, let's catch them up. Noelle, how did your path go after high school? What happened with you? Where'd you go to college? Let's start with that.
Okay. All right. So after I graduated from East, I went to UC Davis, and I thought that I was going to I majored in psychology, and I was doing pre-med path. So,
wow. Okay.
Obviously, I ended up doing something quite different. The first quarter taking those classes, I quickly learned that was not for me, that it wasn't what I enjoyed. And so I did some thinking about what was it that I really liked studying. And I loved my history classes at East. Those had a big impact on me. So I thought that I wanted to be a teacher. And as I started taking those classes, I knew that I wanted to come back home. And I was thinking that I would love to go to East, but I definitely wanted to come back to Bakersfield. And so I started taking teaching, I switched my major to history, started taking the courses needed to go to the credential program. And then when I graduated, I went to Stanford for my credential program. I chose to go there because they had a mixed program where you can get a master's degree in your credential, and it was a clear credential that you could get back. Back then, you still could do that.
Okay, yeah.
And so, it's different now.
Oh, yeah.
So I did that on the advice of Mr. Warner at East to do them both together. So I did that, and the day after I graduated, I packed up my car, and I came back and taught summer school at East.
Okay, so let me get this straight.
I came immediately back.
So literally, you graduated from that master's degree program and drove home and started teaching summer school at East.
Yes. I was lucky to have a summer school job. I didn't realize how lucky I was, I guess. But Cynthia Munn taught directed studies in the summer, and she liked to do 3 weeks rather than 6. So she asked me if I wanted to take the other 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And so I did.
That is so awesome. So
yeah, it was pretty funny.
Okay, so now what class did you graduate from East High? So I've been doing this in chronological order. Right, class of 94. You went straight to UC Davis, and then straight from UC Davis to Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've over the course of these, I believe you're going to be our 11th. You are our 11th fire. I keep doing that. You're our 11th family reunion. So we've heard a lot of different paths taken to get back home to East High. Last week I had Bien Rizolmi. Bien's path was a little bit, it was non-traditional. It was a little bit more meandering, including some time in the service. Your path was direct. And one of the things I'm trying to impress upon our students who may listen to this is that everyone has a different path. There's no one right way to do life. There's a lot of right ways to do life, you know. And so you're that straight as an arrow right way to do life. But even in doing life right for you, the boomerang back to East High was direct as well. So that's interesting to hear. I didn't know that. And
I couldn't get away from there.
So that is so cool. Okay. So what year did you then start teaching at East?
So I started teaching in 1999. So in the last century.
Okay. So you've been at East for just over 20 years as a staff member.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So then let's talk about the other part of the family, which is your own personal family. How are you all doing with the pandemic?
Luckily, we've been doing really well. Kind of cabin fever and stuff, but that's the worst that we've had of it. And so we're really lucky that we could say that.
All right. And so I introduced you at the beginning of the podcast as Mrs. Combs. So the classmates who graduated with you in 1994 probably know you as a different name. So
yes,
clearly you're married. So what was your high school name?
So my high school name was Noelle Perez.
Noelle Perez, which is how my
Yeah.
wife knew you when I started teaching, which we'll get to in a minute because that's also an important part of how paths intertwine and stuff. So I'll get to that in a second. So you are now married to, and what does your husband do?
He's also a teacher.
Right.
He's a program specialist in VCSD for special ed.
Right. And amazing guy. I've had the opportunity to talk to him several times and interact with him. Great guy, which you would expect Noelle to be married to.
Great.
Yeah. I think anyone listening who's trying to catch up with you and knows you from high school want to hear that you married well. So that's good. All right. And then y'all have kids of your own, right? So you take care of a lot of Blades. How many kids do you have, and how old, and what are they up to?
So I have 4 kids. And the oldest is Nissa. She's 16, and she's a junior at East, mm-hmm. which is pretty fun. Mm-hmm. I have her in one of my classes, which is a trip.
Yeah, I bet.
The next one is Melanie. She is 9 years old, and she's in 4th grade. Then we have Cortez, who's 7 in 2nd grade. And then we have our little tiny baby Declan, who is 2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 4 kids. And like me, you've got a pretty good age gap there between your eldest and your youngest, which I do as well.
Yes.
And they're all, as you said at the beginning, they're all doing well in the pandemic, which is great to hear. It's been a struggle for a lot of our families out there. So I think checking in with everyone to make sure that families are doing okay with this is really important. So I'm glad to hear mm-hmm. that y'all are doing fine. So you've been
thanks.
So what is your current assignment at EB?
So now I am teaching 2 periods of AVID. I have a freshman class and then a junior-senior combo. 2 periods of AP U.S. History and then 1 period of general U.S. History.
Okay, so you're doing AVID, teaching in our history department, and then you're also, I think I mentioned earlier, you're also our history department chair, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're involved heavily and strongly in the leadership at our school, which I love having you on your voice. It's important. So thank you for all the things you do at our school.
Oh,
so
you're welcome.
One last thing before we get into those 5 questions. So I've mentioned before in these fireside chats that I was the school police officer before I started teaching. And then I transitioned over into the classroom. So I was literally one day in August, I was still the school cop if anything went on. And then school started coming around and I turned in my badge and gun and became an English teacher and the debate coach at the school. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, anytime you're a new teacher, you are assigned a mentor to help get you through a process of learning how to teach. It's usually a couple-year process. And so today I have the distinct honor of talking to my mentor teacher. So when I say
it's crazy.
well, I've said before and publicly many times that Noelle was instrumental in helping me transition, and I don't think Noelle even appreciates it. I think Noelle just thinks I'm exaggerating or whatever. I'm not. The truth is, when I started, you'll remember this, Noelle, my mother had just passed away, and I was not in a very good emotional place.
Yeah.
So I did need a lot of help just getting myself together to be good for kids in the classroom. And Noelle, you were there for me to help encourage me and help me move along. So I don't know that I would have been able to get through without you, but I certainly know that I did in a great part because of you. So I appreciate that. And thank you for that.
Well, of course. I'm glad that I was helpful.
So then that begs me to ask one last question before we get into this. Over the years, you've been instrumental in that role for, a lot of teachers who've come along at least in the last 15 years. So how many teachers do you think you've mentored in that way? And it's not just, my understanding is it wouldn't just be East High teachers, though I think that's mostly the teachers that you've helped. But over the years, do you have a number on how many teachers you've helped through the process?
That's a really good question. I haven't, really stopped to think about that, actually. Gosh, I don't know, probably at least 30. So I usually have at least 2 teachers a year, and sometimes I have them for more than 1 year, though. So
right.
Yeah, maybe like 25 or 30.
Yeah, that would have been my guess. It's interesting because a lot of teachers would. How do I put this? You influence students through the classroom and in a lot of ways, but there are also a lot of teachers out there who've been directly influenced by you, and I happen to be one of them. So I know that there are others out there who share my sentiments about being successfully able to move into this profession in no small part because of you. So.
Oh, well, that's nice. I just remember, when I started, it's scary, I mean, there's so many things you're responsible for, and it's a hard job. And, I just like to be able to let people know that it's okay, that they're doing well, and that it'll get better. And it's okay to not have all the answers. I was really lucky when I was doing my student teaching. My curriculum instruction professor was still teaching in the classroom. So he would come teach us at night. And he told us that we weren't going to be any good for anybody for about 5 years. Mm-hmm. And he told us how he wanted to drive home from school, on his way to school, just turn the car around, most days for the first year. And so I just always thought of that and thought, you know what, that's normal, because here's this guy who's just super amazing. And if he felt like that in the beginning, then this is a normal thing. Yeah. And I don't think people always realize that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I'll share. I don't usually talk about it, but I'll share it. And I think I've not. I don't think I've even shared this openly with you, Noelle, what I remember. But when I started teaching, I was in a room that had a partial non-weight bearing wall through the middle of the room, which is even hard to describe in a podcast. You almost have to draw it so that people understand what I was dealing with.
That was a weird room.
Yeah, it was very odd. And it was not a classroom. It was not set up to be a classroom at that time. It was set up to be a nurse's office so that there could be 2 rooms, so there could be some privacy. But the school expanded in population so greatly at that time. This was before we opened another school on the east side of town. We opened Miramate, and it relieved a lot of the pressure. But at that time, our population was huge. And so we were putting teachers in places that teachers hadn't been in a long time. And Noelle was absolutely appalled by the layout of my room. And so I talk to staff members frequently, even in back to school meetings, about my first year teaching experience and how I had to teach from the middle of the room and in an open doorway. And Noelle advocated very strongly, I'll just put it that way, for them to come in and get rid of that wall, which didn't happen the entire first semester. The wall stayed up until the holiday break. But when I came back from the holiday break, that wall was gone. And that, again, part of the reason that wall was gone is because Noelle was telling administrators that was ridiculous that I was teaching these classes that way. And so I remember that, and I remember how important it was that you were going to bat for me for that, because I'm not sure. I believe the wall would have probably come down, but I'm not sure it would have positively if you hadn't had a few conversations. And I remember you reassuring me that wasn't right and that it was going to be down, and how important it was.
Weird.
Yeah, it was. I don't even know if you remember that, but to me it was huge because
No, I remember that, and you know what? Like I hadn't thought about that in a long time. But every once in a while, I have these like weird teaching stress dreams that I'm in a classroom that's like that, and that must have been where that got in my mind.
Oh wow, yeah. I could tell you it was just describing it. People aren't going to understand what I'm talking about. They'll understand the emotion of it and that it was, a terrible situation or whatever. But I don't think they'll understand. You'd have to almost see to understand. It was a non-load bearing wall, so there was a gap between that wall and the ceiling. The wall was. It was
like a partition.
Yeah, and it broke up the classroom. You couldn't see through it. It was. You couldn't teach from one side or the other and see the kids. And in order for a few of my classes, in order to seat all the students I had, they had to sit on both sides of the wall. So that meant that I literally had to teach with no technology, standing in basically a hallway or doorway or a little gap where that wall didn't hit the wall on the opposite side of the room. So I literally would teach from a doorway. I taught from what would have been a doorway for an entire semester for 3 of my classes, which is it's horrible. It's horrible. And I was doing that.
Not cool.
And I was doing that after, my mom, who was a teacher. So I buried my mom on a Saturday, started teaching on a Monday from a partition in a room. So it was horrid. It was horrid. So, and in a lot of ways, and I say the emotional part, but you really actually advocated to get that wall out of my room. You couldn't believe it. And I think when they finally got it down, you were pleased, but there was a lot of conversations about the wall. So I just remember you going to bat for me, and I appreciate that.
Aw. Well, you're welcome. And if anybody is listening that was in the 90s, went to school in the 90s, I remember them taking us down there to do hearing tests. And then you would go down there to do, like, the sports physicals. Mm-hmm. So, like, I remember thinking of that room, like, when I was a kid, it, like, looked like a maze. It was a weird room. Yeah,
it had several little closets to it, which could be used for individual rooms, examination rooms. It had a shower in the back, a bathroom in the back. I mean, it was a full-blown nurse's office. It had a separate office next to it for the nurse.
Yeah. It had a little office in there. And
yeah. And it's used for our on-campus intervention room. Eddie is in that room, who I'll be talking to probably in 6 or 7 weeks, actually. We're coming up on Eddie's group here pretty soon, the 2000s graduates. But Eddie's down there now. The wall is gone. But the years that I was the police officer there, our nurse, I believe it was Miss Cisneros, was down in that room. So here are the big 5. Question number 1. What teacher or staff member made the biggest difference in your EB high school education? This is not a class. I'm talking about a human being.
So this question is really hard.
Okay.
But it's also really easy. So I think you know what my obvious answer is, but there are, I can't like not mention some people.
Okay. So that's okay. I think everyone has multiple.
I've got a list.
So it's okay.
I've got a list.
Okay, good. Let's hear it.
So here is my list, and I might leave someone out, and if I do and they're listening, I'm really sorry, but I just have to mention a few people. So there's Mr. Ayala. Mr. Ayala was my teacher almost all the way through. So he was the band director, and I played flute, and his wife was my flute teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Ayalas, Mr. Ayala and his wife too, were really important to me, like all the way through. So I had band, so I'd see him every day. And I think the first 2 years he was there the whole time, but then he was ill, and so he had to take some time off for his health. But I still kept in touch with him. And then when I came back to school to teach, he was a big, supporter, cheerleader of mine. And I can't not mention Mr. Ayala.
Right. Yeah.
There's also,
He was hugely important when I started back as an administrator. Just in the part time that we had him teaching at the school, he was teaching our English language learners. It was huge. It was huge. He really was able to connect with kids. So, all right.
He's just awesome. So I love Mr. Ayala. And Mr. Ayala also, maybe I'll tell this story a little bit later. Without Mr. Ayala and band and the youth symphony, which I was involved in because of Mr. Ayala, I wouldn't have met my husband, where I wouldn't have got to know him in the first place, I guess. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a fun story. I'll tell you that a little bit later after I talk about the people.
Okay, cool.
Then there's Mr. Ortega, who I had for Spanish, and I was in his class for 2 years. And then he let me do independent studies in Spanish with him my last year, my senior year, so I could do 3 years. And his is so funny. Like, he's a quiet guy. Like, he wasn't scary, he wasn't loud, but the class was always like in check with Mr. Ortega. And he had the craziest stories. Like, he's like done so many cool things in his life, and he'd tell us about different things. And he's just funny, and I loved his class.
That's
and
cool.
He also was really supportive of me too when I came back.
Yep, he was still around.
Okay. Yeah.
Very
good.
And
Miss Lapp, yeah. Jennifer Lapp also.
Now, how did you have Jennifer?
Well, okay, so I was in band, and I was always over there by choir.
Uh-huh.
And she'd tell me, you should join choir. And I was like, yeah, I can't sing. And, her comeback for that is, if you can talk, you can sing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like on a whim, junior year, they were having tryouts for choir at the end of the year. And some friends got me to go. I don't know. I was like, yeah, right. Haha, I'll go to audition for choir. And I think she just must have liked me or something, or thought, well, she can read music. But she put me in chamber singers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. That is typical Jennifer.
Hilarious.
Yeah, but that's what she does. That's what she did. I mean, she
yes.
has
an
ear for talent is what she had.
Well, she's just amazing, and just so kind, and in choir she would talk a lot about things that life skill kind of things, and and she's always just been so kind to me, as a teacher, always checking in on me, seeing how I'm doing, especially in the early years, and even still now. So she's really important to me.
Again,
also
me too.
Miss Spanos. Yes. Miss Spanos also, Vicki Spanos. She was my teacher my freshman year and my senior year for English. And she was just always so sweet. Mm-hmm. And then there's Barbara Malm. I don't know if you ever met Barbara Malm.
No.
But she was the cheerleading advisor. Okay. And she was this tall Texan lady with a thick accent, and just impeccable, always dressed just so nice. Her hair is always just so, and she is the most disciplined person I have ever met. And which was really cool for me. And she was our cheer advisor and stuff. So I really liked B Malm. She always signed her name B Malm, and we'd call her B Malm.
I've never met her. I think I have heard the name before, and I don't really recall where. But
yeah, she's just sweet, and she had a really cool way of doing special things for us. just like little special things. I remember so in her room, she was in Christina Bryant's classroom. That was her room. In the back of that room, there are like, well, I don't know if they're still there, but these like closets full of drawers. So she gave each of us a drawer to be like our personal mailbox or something whenever she needed to give us stuff. And we decorated our drawers. So I think a lot of things that I do like for Avid are things that I learned from Miss Malm.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, and we had a sleepover in her classroom one year, all the cheerleaders, and it was at Christmas time, and we had a paper Christmas tree. We made ornaments and put them on there. And she did this cool game where we had a partner. We had to fill out this paper about things we liked about that person.
Oh,
and
that's neat.
It was really cool, and it's something that I usually do at Christmas time in my Avid classes. So,
oh, cool.
So she is really special to me. But of course, the biggest influence on me is Mr. Warner,
right.
Mike Warner.
Right. I had an idea you might say him, and you were not the first person to say Mike. So as I'm going through this generation of Blades, that kind of mid-90s, I think he's going to come up from time to time, which is awesome.
Yes, because he's an amazing teacher, and his class was so fun. Like, I always liked history, but when I was in Mr. Warner's class, we would do like crazy things, like, well, not crazy, great, like little skits about the Depression where we'd reenact a picture from Dorothea Lange, or there's a lot of things like that we do, and it just was like always fun to learn. And he was so encouraging too. I was pretty shy and quiet back then, and so my senior year when I was in We the People with Miss Silverman, who's another one who's really special to me, I always was really shy to speak up in the cross exam part. And I remember we went to state, and we did the hearing, and I talked more than usual. And I remember afterwards, Mr. Warner came up and he told me, he's like, today is the day, like, you became your own, or something like that. And
wow,
that meant so much to me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so, I kept in touch with him as I went to college, and he just always supported me. He was my mentor teacher when I started teaching, and I got to coach mock trial with him. And so he's just been my teacher since 1992.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll, as I do, like I said, I'll make sure we email the link to Mike so he can hear this. Mr. Warner taught both Karen and Kaylee, so he's had generational influence in the Holland household as well. So
awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I did expect that I would hear his name as well. So like I said, you were not the first person to say Mike, so that's good. Okay. So, and I will say also, there have been over the years a variety of people have made the impact, and I've heard those stories told back to me over the course of these podcasts. I'm going to ask you about a specific person who I think had a generational impact that I know was really impressed and cared about you a lot. Okay, but it's not someone you think of normally, but he's come up before. Do you have any high school memories of the security guard, Jesse?
Jesse, oh my goodness, yes. When I saw this question, I don't know why I didn't think of Jesse, but I love Jesse.
Yeah, so he's come up before, and the reason I bring up Jesse is simply this. First of all, he was there when I was the school cop and when I started teaching, and he loved that I went from being the school cop. Jesse took pride in any success any Blade had. But when Jesse left East, he had students who he remembered their grandparents causing problems at the school or cutting school or whatever. So he would tell these kids, Mija, I remember your granddad used to do the same thing you're doing. You need to come to class, and it was some of the most amazing conversations to hear him and how much respect the kids had for him and stuff. So I know he was around when you were in high school. I was curious to hear if he yeah. I know
Well,
that Jesse was really proud of you. So
oh, well, that, I mean, I didn't really know the security guards very well.
right. Well,
As a
you didn't get in
student. Like,
trouble,
I
but
didn't get
see,
in trouble, and I tried to like avoid them because I didn't want to get in trouble, like accidentally or something.
right. But
So,
here's what happens though, and this is, I think, for the people listening and kids listening, we often think, and this is, I remember this and know this because I fell under that security umbrella. A lot of times you think that the security officers really only know the kids that are getting in trouble. And they do. They know those kids really well by name. Those are the kids that Jesse talked to the most, and all of our security officers talked. Estelle, Wendy, they're all, for the kids the people who graduated with you, all three of them were around when you were in high school.
mm-hmm.
But they also remember the kids who were involved because they have to work every event. So
Yeah, that's true.
The reason that Jesse was proud of you is because he saw you play the flute. He saw you cheer, and he knew you as that good student who was involved in everything. And I think one of the first people to actually talk to me about you when I was the school cop was actually Jesse. I think Jesse's the one before. I think Karen had obviously, I think Karen had talked to me about you too. But I think Jesse, if those don't remember, Karen is my wife who graduated a year before Noelle and was in a band with Noelle for 3 years. But as the police officer, I think the first person who talked to me about you being a Blade, being a student, him remembering you as a student, was actually Jesse on my security team. So yeah,
that's nice. Yeah. But yeah, as a teacher though, I remember I think he came, it's got to be like early on. He was like, I remember when you were a student, he was telling me that, and he'd always check on me, like always.
Yep. That's how he was. Yeah. Yeah. That he, and he
super short and little. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right.
Aww. And that's one thing, like having those teachers. A lot of them were still there when I came back to teach.
Right.
And it was just the most wonderful thing, though, to be there and know that there was no way those people were going to let me fail. Like, no way.
Yeah.
And that helped me have confidence and helped me, enjoy what I was doing and keep on. And so I'm so thankful to them all. Even if I didn't mention them, when I came back, I knew, they're never going to let me fail. And, Cynthia Munn is another one. She was never my teacher. I was in one of the clubs she advised. But, she took such good care of me, too, when I started teaching.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's this, I don't know how to even describe it, but there is a lot of pride when a student who went to the school comes back and teaches there. And I've been able to hire, a handful now. I again,
Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier, I haven't actually sat down and counted, but I've been able to bring back several Blades, and it's always, I get the best feeling about it when I'm able to do it. So.
Oh, it's so special.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Okay, so what was your favorite class?
So I kind of mentioned that a little bit with the teacher. So U.S. history, definitely loved U.S. history. And then band, I had that every year. And so that's where most of my friends were. And band was like a big old family. And I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear those answers. That's what I thought you'd say. And I think for you at least, clearly the relationships and some of the things that we still talk to teachers about were important in those classes being up there on your list. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you've alluded to question 3 already. What is your favorite high
Yes.
school memory?
Okay, so when I was looking at that one, it was really hard. So I had to think about that one for a lot because I don't necessarily have like a favorite high school memory. I just, when I think back on it, it's not so much like a big thing, but just like all the little small everyday kind of things, that went on. It's just when I think of, being a kid at East, it's just a lot of positive feeling. But I have a few little stories, though, maybe not memories, but stories that are fun.
All right, sure.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so one is silly. So, it's my freshman year. I had Mr. Cantrell, Andy Cantrell, for geometry, and it was second period, which is like homeroomy kind of extra minutes period, and there was a canned food drive, and we could get extra credit for bringing in cans. And I was a little grade weenie, and I wanted to make sure I had like an A.
Right.
So I gathered a bunch of cans together, and I had them sitting at the door. And then I left for school. I took the cans. I didn't look in the bag, but it was heavy, and I was like, it looked like cans, so I went.
Oh boy. Okay.
Well, then I'm in Mr. yeah, this was bad. I'm in Mr. Cantrell's class, and then my mom shows up in the doorway of Mr. Cantrell's class. I'm like, uh-oh.
Okay.
And back then, parents, could show up. She went to the office, and she told them that she had exchanged the bag that I took to school because my mom was the treasurer for the Sunday school at our church. And on Sundays, they made donuts. The dads would make donuts, and they'd sell the donuts, and everybody'd pay in quarters. So what I took was a giant bag of quarters.
Oh, my goodness.
That was supposed to go to the bank.
Oh, no.
Yes. So my mom came to give me the cans and take the money.
Oh, my goodness.
I know.
And you just left them sitting by the door?
No, they're just sitting there, because I thought they were cans. It looked like cans. I don't know. It was about that weight. So she came and exchanged that, and I remember I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh, my teacher probably thinks I'm a weirdo, but Mr. Cantrell is another one I could have listed because he was sweet enough to trust me with his kids. I used to babysit his girls when they were little.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool too.
Yeah. So we got through that. So that was kind of an embarrassing story, but fun. And then let's see. I remember we went on a really cool trip with Mr. Mcgee. Dean Mcgee was my English teacher my sophomore year, and he had us read Phantom of the Opera, and we went to see Phantom of the Opera in LA. And I remember that was just a super fun trip, like with my friends, and we got to see Phantom of the Opera.
So
that is one. And listen all the time.
That is my wife's favorite high school memory as well, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Gosh, it comes up every time we see. Oh, it didn't happen this year, but usually so for anyone who's listening, Dr. Mcgee is now one of the associate superintendents in the high school district. So, so some of the blades who might be out there, that means if you're keeping track, the superintendent is Dr. Schaefer, who might have been your math teacher, and one of his partners over there is Dr. Mcgee, who might have been one of your English teachers. With regards to Dr. Mcgee, anytime we see him, my wife she just has to talk to him about it because it was such a really cool event for her. And she's been a fan of Phantom of the Opera, or it might have been Les Mis. I don't know. It was one of the two. I can't remember which one now off the top of my head, but she's seen them both, and I think it was Phantom, and she talks to Dr. Mcgee every time she sees him. So about it. Yeah,
that was such a fun trip. And mostly when I think of like high school, I'll think of like the football games. We used to be at DC.
Yeah.
And so every Friday night, almost. Well, and a lot of other schools had their games at DC too. So it seems like every Friday night we'd be at DC, and I'd cheer for part of one of the game, or depending on the year it was. and then I'd be doing the halftime show with the band or sitting with the band. And that's just kind of not like a particular memory, but just kind of like a conglomeration of just like, that was fun.
Yeah.
But my best story, I think, which I didn't think of it as a story at all for a long time, but my freshman year, they started up the Bakersfield Symphony started up a youth symphony, and they asked music teachers to gather some students together. So Mr. Ayala, put me in. I was in the youth symphony because of Mr. Ayala, but my husband also was too, and my cousin. They play percussion. I play flute, and the percussion didn't come until like the day before for the dress rehearsal or something. And so I remember sitting there, we were playing, and I look across because where the flutes are, you can kind of. I don't know if that's why it was, but I just remember looking across the room and I see this guy like tightening up the timpanis or something, listening to the timpanis, and I was like, "Oh, that guy's pretty cute over there. I wonder where he goes to school."
Okay.
And then I didn't know that guy with the timpani saw me and thought, "Oh, who's that girl? I wonder where she goes to school."
Wow. Okay.
And so he asked the other drummer, who was my cousin, Graham Ferdinand, and he says, "Oh, who's that girl?" And he's like, "That's my cousin." And he's like, "What? Nuh-uh." And he's like, "Yeah, she goes to our school. Like, you haven't seen her?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "Introduce her to me." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And so, like, at band the next week or whatever after the weekend, because the concert was on the weekend, my cousin Graham, like, comes up to me, because I guess he told him, like, "Oh, look, I'll go talk to her. See, you'll see, she's my cousin." So he comes up and talks to me, and he's like, "Yeah, this guy over here says he didn't believe you were my cousin." Or I'm like, "What?" And so that's how I met Chris.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. But being a dumb teenage girl, when I realized that he went to school with me, I'm like, "Oh, well, I didn't notice him before, so whatever."
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And I know, I was so dumb. And he would talk. We became good friends, and he'd like ask me out sometimes, and I'd be like, "No, you're my friend. That would be weird." But so it took me 4 years of growing up, at East, to realize that that's exactly the type of person you should want to be with, is someone who's a good friend. And so we started dating after we graduated. So we're not high school sweethearts, but we did meet in high school.
Okay. So it sounds like y'all, well, at least you, I haven't heard Chris's side of the story. So maybe I'm going to have to ask him. I want to hear the other side of this. But it sounds like, at least from your recollection, you had to mature a little bit in order to appreciate that relationship, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, that's how I feel.
Okay.
It was.
I am going to verify one of these days with Chris that he agrees with you on this, because I will.
Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, he'll tell you that he wore me down.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad.
But I don't think that's true.
I'm glad he did. Because Nissa's awesome.
Me too.
So, I mean, and I don't know your other three kids like I know Nissa. Nissa's awesome. So.
Oh, thank you. I think she's pretty sweet too.
So, I will say this. Who knows if you had started dating earlier, whether or not y'all would have been mature enough to get through. So it worked out for the best, clearly. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, those high school relationships are something else. So
They are. But sometimes they do work out.
Sometimes they do.
Because my mom and dad met at East also, and they were high school sweethearts, and they're still married, so 46 years.
Oh, my goodness. That is awesome. So Nissa is one of those kids that Jesse would have talked about the grandparents.
They've been married.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, that is so neat. Okay.
Yeah. I have a funny story about them.
Yeah, share, please. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I never verified this with anybody on campus, but I don't know if there was anyone left. But apparently, my mom and dad were dating, and my dad would walk my mom to her, class. And one time he kissed her outside the window, and the teacher, and she told me the name of the teacher, but I can't remember. It wasn't someone who was still there when I went to school.
Okay.
Like, knocked on the window to, like, kind of, like, knock it off and broke the window.
Oh, my goodness. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Oh,
So she would always tell me that.
That is awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. There's so many little memories like that. I will share with you this week. We had a teacher who retired a couple of years ago. A teacher named Mr. Mccormick. He was a science teacher.
Oh, yeah.
So I get this. There's a program that we have for principals where you get alerted if your school comes up on any media outlets. So if something about East High School is on the local news, I have an email I receive every day, and it'll say East Bakersfield High School in the headline, and I can watch what happened on the news so I can see what, if something's going on, basically.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah, well, last week there was one that said it's not 100%. It's an algorithm. It's an AI deal. So last week there was one that said Bakersfield High School, but it was the only one that I saw that day. So I clicked on it to see what it was. And it was so random. There was some chemistry company, some company that was making chemistry products for chemistry classrooms that some school district somewhere was banning. Okay. And the news story starts with a picture of these kind of like rainbow, different colored globes. And they're saying, and the school district has decided to ban them. It wasn't that long ago, back in 1999 at East Bakersfield High School, where an explosion in a chemistry classroom. And I'm like, what in the world? 20 years later, they're still talking about that.
Oh my goodness!
So some of these little things that happen, breaking a window here and there, you never know whose memory that's going to come up in. Clearly, someone in that newsroom was in his class that day, and it's still in their mind. All these, 20 years later, about how there was a small explosion in Mr. McCormick's room. So it was pretty interesting. It was so random. I'll forward you the news clip so you can see it.
I'll have to look at that.
I
remember that very well.
Oh, see, so yeah, that would have been, I think, your first year is when that happened.
It was.
Yeah.
It was, and
first day of school, your first year.
Another teacher who was, yes, it was, yeah. So I mentioned some of the teachers that were really helpful, influential to me. Keith Redding is another one of them.
Oh yes,
and
yes.
He would do this thing with freshmen where he would take them on a tour of the school on the first day of school in history. And he suggested that to me. And so I did that. And we were on our tour in that area of the school. And it was like, there was security. They're like, you can't come over here. There's been an explosion.
Oh, my goodness.
And so my students were like, oh, what? And I was like, what? Because I just started teaching. It's like my first or second day of school with the kids.
First day. So. Wow. Yeah, it was so remarkable. I couldn't believe that's how we came up that day. And I remember, it was just a few days ago. And I remember my first thought was John Gibson talking about that at Francis's retirement. So I immediately sent the clip. I texted it to Mrs. Casas so she could take a look at it. And it was cracking her up too. It was the most random. It was so and the details they knew, and I'm not going to say on the podcast, but they knew exactly what he did that caused that explosion. There was clearly an incendiary mixed with something that he was trying to do a demonstration in front of the class, and it caused an explosion. And they had the details. So that's what I'm saying. Somebody in that newsroom, someone in that newsroom was in his class that day. So it was funny.
Oh my
goodness,
so funny. That's funny.
All right. So here are the two big time questions for our kids, our students. The first one is, what is one piece of advice you would go back and give yourself right before your freshman year, and what would that advice be for our incoming freshmen now?
Oh, I really had trouble looking at this question and trying to think about it. I don't know. I do remember before I started school, I was feeling really nervous for some reason. So I would probably tell myself, like, don't be nervous. You're going to have a great time. It's all going to be okay. You know, you don't need to stress. But advice I would give to the kids now would probably be to make sure that they get involved. And I know that's hard to do right now because we're online.
Right.
But I'd also tell them to let these people here at East love you. Just like, let us love you. Because there's a lot of people that want to help them and want to help them, you know, reach their goals and, you know, enjoy and learn. And sometimes, you know, we're not open to that. So I would just suggest that the kids just let us love you because we want to, and we're okay.
I love that. I love that. That is
Aww.
great. And you know, I'm big on that. I'm big on loving the kids, but yeah, that's very insightful. Thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. No, and that's one thing you know, being a teacher this long, and I think of some kids that, you know, I didn't feel like I was able to reach. You know, I just think, you know, gosh, just let me in. I want to help you. Let me in.
Yeah, I think we all have that, you know, that experience. So yeah, I do appreciate that. Okay, and this is the big one, and I think hearing you articulate your path back to East, I really want to hear this. So, what does it mean to you to be a Blade?
Ooh, this one's kind of hard too. But you know, our little acronym family, I think the L is a big part of what it means to be a Blade, the legacy.
Right.
Like, to be a Blade is to belong to something that's much bigger than you and that has lasted a lot longer than you have. You know, it's belonging to something that's old and is enduring and that is cherished by a lot of people. And so when you're a Blade, even if, you know, you're not doing great big things, you know, at the school, you're part of that, those, you know, 4 years that are so critical as we grow up. And just being there around this, that's something that, you know, the people at the school for those 4 years share together.
Right.
And it's part of that, like, fog of memory there. They're part of it. And it's great, you know, just to be part of something bigger than yourself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Okay. So, Mrs. Combs, before I let you go, I want to ask you, is there anything else that you'd like to share with someone who may be listening out there, or something we didn't touch on that you'd like to say for our audience?
I don't know. I just feel so lucky to be a Blade. And if there's anyone listening who I went to school with, I hope you're doing well. And, you know, even if I didn't know you, whenever I'm out and about and I hear that someone went to East, yeah, it just makes me feel really proud. And I'm proud of you all. And it's just awesome.
Very good. Very good. All right, Noelle, I'm going to hit the stop button and stop recording. Okay. And thank you so much for the time. It's always awesome to hear these stories. Your story is just it's like almost poetic. I mean, the next day, I did not know that. That is so awesome. The next day you teach a summer school. That is just, that's Blade stuff right there. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. And thank you for listening. I got to tell you, talking to Noelle was a treat for me, and I hope it was for you. Clearly, Noelle was extremely important to me being able to be sitting here talking to you as the principal at East Bakersfield High School. I might not have made it through as a teacher even without Noelle's help and assistance. Clearly, she's a bright light for our kids and does a lot of important things for staff members and faculty. So I do this every week as a labor of love. As you know, I just enjoy talking to my teachers and hearing their stories. But I also hope you may feel inclined to donate a little money to East Bakersfield High School for some principal scholarships. I want to get our amazing Blades out this summer. Some of the kids will be returned to us, some summer programs to enrich their learning, and also some scholarships for our kids that are going away to college. If you want to donate, please give us a call at East High School. Our finance office would be more than willing to take your donation. Until next time, I love you guys. We're the home of scholars and champions. And as always, go Blades. Let's go Blades. Let's go Blades. Let's go Blades. Let's go Blades.